YouTube, what's good? In today's video, we're going to be doing a battle report review, which is going to be the Death Guard versus the Adeptus Custodes. Now, I played this game the other day. This is my Death Guard list. As you can see, the actual list is printed in the description below, as well as my opponent's Adeptus Custodes list. This list mainly revolves around a combo that exists between the Plagueburst Crawlers, the Terminators over here off to the side, and this unit right here, which is the Noxious Blightbringer. That one right there, that awesome dude. Just so new players understand, when you're playing against the Adeptus Custodes, their army versus my army looks slightly different, as you can see, and they tend to have smaller units, and because they have a smaller number of units, they are extremely tough. So going into turn 1, as you can see how I deployed, I left my Plagueburst Crawlers hiding back here. I also have my Plague Marines hidden behind this corner back here so that they stay safe. I moved my Chaos Cultists onto this side so that they could rush this corner or this objective over here so that I could take that objective. And then I was also going to rush to the center of the board with this unit of Cultists over here. He does have a unit behind this wall that he can contest, but he would have to roll pretty well to be able to get there within one turn, so I felt like I had an advantage there in the center. And then my opponent has the majority of his forces over here in this corner, so I just wanted to use my Poxwalkers to just hold them off, but really I was just looking to control this center of the board right over here. So as you can see over here, I made my scout moves and I moved up my cultists up here. I moved up those cultists over here, and then those cultists over here, and then I ended up moving the Poxwalkers that I had over here. Unbeknownst to me, he had those units that were able to shoot with really powerful guns. I didn't know that Custodes had access to guns like that. And then I moved my Plagueburst Crawler out over here so that I would be able to have line of sight on some units over here as well. And I left my Nurglings in this spot just to avoid deep strike from my opponent. Just so you guys know, in my shooting phase, I was able to shoot at these sisters over here in the corner with the mortars, and I was able to take them out in combination with the cultists that I have over here in the corner that scored me some mission points. Going into my opponent's turn, he was able to advance his wardens through this wall by rolling a 6, and then he also rolled a 6 on this custodian guard unit through this over here, which means that both of them gained 12 inches of movement that turn. Now guys, like, this is a game of dice, which means it's a game of luck. However, I think that as someone who has experienced cheating before, there's supposed to be a 16% chance that you roll a 6. And some people can get lucky, right? However, after this had happened, I immediately looked at my opponent's dice and I grabbed his dice off the table and I started rolling it. I rolled it about 8 times and I must have seen 6s pop up more than 50% of the time as I was rolling his dice. And when I grabbed the dice and started rolling it, my opponent immediately said, "Oh, those are loaded dice. They only really roll 3s and 6s." And that was literally what was popping up. Now, I can't sit here and say that my opponent was actually using loaded dice. However, I think that I had an experience one time and mind you, like, I'm new to Warhammer. Like, I've never played like dice-based games before, and I first started playing Kill Team, and I had played against this one opponent, and every single time he would roll dices to save, he always used this pair of blue dice. He had another set of dice over there, like the orange dice that we used for Kill Team, but then he had blue dice off to the side. And whenever he went to go roll his saves or like important ones, he would grab his blue dice and roll it, and it was either a 5 or a 6. Every single time. And I'm like, "Man, dude, you're rolling super well today. You're doing really good." And then he ended up winning that game. And then, I walked away, and some of the guys in the store walked up to me and told me, he was like, "Yeah, some people roll really well, but some dice are just better than others." And I was like, "What do you mean some dice are just better than others?" He's like, "Yeah, they're just good." And I was like, whatever. Like, I was like, okay, whatever. So now I'm in the store looking at the dice, thinking that some dice are just better dice. But, you know, as I was driving home, I'm like, you know what? I got home and I'm sitting there, I'm like, what does he mean by that? So I started looking up stuff on the internet, and I found out that people can cheat with dice, that people can like heat up their dice to cause them to roll on one side or the other, or to put holes in the dice to make them roll certain ways or whatever. So I'm sitting there, and the next time I play against that guy again in Kill Team, you know, now I'm using the Imperial Deathcore Krieg, and he was using Chaos Space Marines. I'm going to roll, and then he grabs his blue dice and he starts to roll blue dice, and it's like 5 and 6 again. So then I was like, let me see those dice. And then now he's like, dude, his hands were like this. I don't know if you can see my hands shaking, bro, but his hands were shaking like this, and his voice was like he was like skipping breaths. And I was like, oh, let me see the dice. And I grabbed the dice and I started rolling it, 5 or 6, rolling it, 5, like 4, 6, rolling it, 5, 5, rolling it, 6, 6. And I'm like, dude, like these dice do a really good job of rolling these numbers. I wonder why they keep rolling. And I'm like looking at him in the eye while I'm rolling it, and it's popping up. Like, I wonder why. I was like, don't use these dice anymore, dude. And like now it's like quiet in the store, and like I think that I kind of like called him out, but like I didn't really want to make like a big deal out of it. But like I would make jokes later on, like when he was rolling, I'm like, oh, why don't you just grab the blue dice? Why don't you roll blue dice? You probably make your save, you know? But I didn't want to like outwardly just accuse him of doing that. And I think that in this situation, like he had rolled and I kind of did the same thing, and the same thing kind of happened. And I kind of felt that same vibe, and he immediately told me that they were cheating, even though he could have just been like sarcastic and not like, he could have just been making fun, right? And there's always a chance for that, which is why I played out the entirety of the rest of the game, you know? But like, I think the only reason I'm sharing this story is because if you're a player that's brand new to Warhammer, you have to understand that these things happen, and you also have to know how to deal with these situations like an adult, where like I was free from calling this individual out, I was free from getting angry. I just kindly asked the individual, like, hey, like, put those dice off to the side, don't use those dice anymore. Even though like you can see his dice over here in the corner, who knows how many of those dice over there in the corner are acting the same way, you know? There could be a certain number of them, or just a certain color that act a certain way. But it's like, it was enough for me, I rolled enough 6s for me to look at that, and I'm like, this is not a 16% chance. Like, dude, like I was rolling, I need to roll a 5 and a 6 on my Poxwalkers in order to keep my Poxwalkers from dying from their invulnerable save, or their feel no pain, I mean. And dude, like I was losing Poxwalkers left and right, bro. Like I would have to roll like 17 dice, and I would be lucky if I saved like 1 Poxwalker out of all of those shots. And always keep in mind, guys, we always play these games for fun, and like even if something like this happens to you, like still like treat everyone with respect. And like even if you know definitively like this happened, like in this point in time, like I can't ever for the rest of my life be able to know if this is true or not. And even if it did, I would still treat the person with respect. I would still play games against them. It would be, you know, we're in Jersey, so it's like, it's whatever, dude. People are very kind and understanding and respectful over here, so it's just, that's just the way it is. However, I think like people are respectful here because they know how to respect themselves. So if you want to learn how to respect yourself, if you're in a moment like this and you just want to have a fun game, just politely ask to roll their dice, check the dice. If you see that it's sketchy, just ask them to pull it off to the side. And in the moment, if you feel like you don't want to continue playing the game, then don't continue to play the game. If you want to respect your own time, just go play against somebody else and tell them like, hey, like that's weird, like I don't want to do this. For me personally, like I don't really care. Like, dude, if I'm playing against cheated dice, if I can beat a person that's using cheat dice, then dude, that would be really cool for me. But like honestly, I don't care that much. I'm just telling you guys so that as new players, you guys can be aware. So my opponent was able to move his wardens and his other custodian guard over here up to the corners, and he moved the one unit that has tremendous shooting for the custodians down, and literally killed like 17 of my Poxwalkers over here in this corner that at some point you're gonna see become evaporated because there's only 3 of them left over there. And I believe this was after turn 1. So now I'm stuck in a place where I'm gonna be able to capture this objective. I think at this point I actually have this objective. My opponent has the one over here in the corner. So going into turn 2, after I moved, I was able to score points on this, score points here, and I think I was able to take this objective by having more units. I also moved my poxwalkers over here off to the side so that I would be able to not take any more shooting from this unit down over there in that corner. And I also moved the 3 poxwalkers that I had left after that just devastation of shooting. I moved them back into this corner over here because I had to move my plague burst crawlers off to the side, and I moved them back here just to deny deep strike because he still had a couple units in reserves that he was going to deep strike. Like this unit over here, he ended up deep striking, even though I'm not even sure if this unit is allowed to deep strike, but I'm pretty sure he can, on strategic reserves, he can bring it in on any corner of the board. So the way I screened out that deployment, it kind of looks like that anyway. I think that this unit should technically be like against the tape over here off to the side. However, it is what it is. And I think that having this set up here, I moved up my Plague Burst Crawlers, as you guys can see, and this one over here. As you notice, this Imperial Knight thing is no longer there in this picture because I was able to take out that unit. And all I'm really trying to do right now is just trying to have my opponent take out more of my cultists, just score as many objective points as I can going into turn 3 so that I can set up my combo to hopefully deal a ton of damage to my opponent. So during my opponent's turn 2, he was able to basically claim this entire objective over here, which was good for him. He was also able to take out my cultists over here off to the side with his units. And what I would end up doing is just moving these cultists up to this corner over here to contest the objective the next turn. He also took that unit that was up top here and moved it down. And then he also moved that giant unit and moved it across, as you can see. And then he also has a custodian guard that he moved across, and he also used a stratagem that allowed him to make this a sticky objective, so he still has that. Keep in mind that in this picture over here, my poxwalkers are still over here in this corner behind that wall, or however many are left of them. And I think there are 2 that I used to run up into this corner over here to retake that objective. I use those poxwalkers over there to run into that objective over here to take that objective from my opponent. Although I think I should have taken those poxwalkers and probably screened out the side over here so that this unit didn't have access to running or charging into my plague burst crawlers. And due to the threat, luckily for me, my opponent ended up failing his charge, so he wasn't able to charge into my Plague Burst Crawlers. Now over here in turn 3, you guys can see that I end up moving my Plague Burst Crawlers off to the side. You know, the missions that I ended up pulling here were specifically just telling me that I had to take an objective that my opponent controlled, and then I also had to destroy a unit that was sitting on an objective that my opponent controlled. AKA, the only thing that I could do to score points was to destroy the wardens over here. So now we have our combo set up. So we have my Plague Marine unit with the Noxious Blightbringer over here in the corner, and then we also have my Lord of Virulence looking at the unit, giving my Plague Burst Crawlers that buff. As you guys can see over here, this is the combo. This is the main purpose of my Death Guard list, to set up the combo that I have set up over here. I have the 3 Plague Burst Crawlers. Every time they land a hit with the mortar, my opponent has to take a battle shock test. The Noxious Blightbringer that you can see over there has an ability that says that every time my opponent takes a battle shock test, they're -2 to their result. So if they roll a 8, it becomes a 6. If they roll a 6, it becomes a 4, which means it's more likely that they fail battle shock. The thing is that he also has an ability called the Droning that forces my opponent to take mortal wounds on a 2 through 5 or D3 mortal wounds on a roll of a 6 after they fail a battle shock test. And which is nice for the Custodes, because the Custodes have that 4-up field and pin on the mortal wounds, so he was saving a lot of those mortal wounds. I think I was able to take out maybe 1 or 2 of the Custodian Wardens with this combo over here, and as you're going to see in a second, I was able to land a charge on them with 1 unit of Terminators as well as the Plague Burst Crawler. So as you can see, I was able to charge in with the units that I mentioned earlier. And honestly guys, in retrospect, after watching this video, In the end, only 2 of the Custodian Wardens were left after this combo. I could have used this stratagem called for Sanguinous Flux. That would have given my weapons sustained hits too, because I would have been the controller of that objective at that point because of my units. And I most likely would have been able to wipe out the entire unit, which I know now in retrospect, and I'm grateful to have learned that lesson. However, that's something that you can keep in mind. Also, you know, I took the Lord of Virulence to make the Plague Burst Crawler shots land on 2s, the mortar shots. However, against Custodes and maybe even against other armies, maybe I don't even think that +1 to hit is really all that important. I think what really does the damage here with these attacks is generally the charge afterwards. And because the units are battle shocked, they can't use any stratagems to help them from your charge, and you're able to just deal a ton of damage because the Blightlord Terminators, you know, shooting capabilities are extremely weak. So I would just recommend taking the Lord of Contagion as opposed to taking Lord of Virulence, so that you get re-rolls on your hits and your wounds on your melee attacks, which is going to be infinitely more effective. Because I'm pretty sure if I had a Lord of Virulence here doing this right now, that I would have wiped out the entire unit even without the stratagem, and definitely with that stratagem. So it's just something to keep in mind. But when you're building around Death Guard, you are supposed to on purpose just keep your units alive, this unit in particular right here, alive as long as possible, so that you can set up this combo and then put yourself in a position where in this game in particular, as we go on to our later turns, so the game basically ended on turn 3 because we just didn't have enough time to finish the game. However, the way the game ended was there was about 2 or 3 of his units left over here in this corner. He had charged my Plague Burst Crawler with his blades over here. That would have taken out my Plague Burst Crawler, I will have to say. But I would have been left with my combo still intact. I would have still had my Terminators in this corner. My Terminators would have most likely killed this unit over here and just finished them after they dealt damage to my Terminators. And on top of that, that Warden unit was dealing 1 damage on all of their attacks because I had debuffed their damage by 2. So if it was 3, it would have went down to 2, but because I only dealt 2 damage and they can't go down to 0, they dealt 1 damage each on each for their melee attacks, which would have kept my Terminators alive, or at least like most of them. Where in the return fire I could have used that, or the return melee I could have used that stratagem that I was then aware of to wipe out that unit there, and then I could have set up the combo to take out this Blade Guard unit. And then I don't know if my opponent really has enough firepower to be able to take out my combo. I would be able to use that mortar combo with my units and my Terminators for the next 3 turns consecutively, which I think would have allowed me to just pick and choose what I wanted to obliterate on the board or eliminate on the board, which I think would have put me in a good position to win the game late. I can't say whether I would have won or whether I would have lost. I can say I was down by 3 points, so it was a relatively close game up to this point right here in particular. However, it would have just been up to, you know, what missions we drew into and what we would have been able to do. It was an incredibly close game, and I think, you know, not a lot of people would expect Death Guard to put up a close game against your opponents. But if you would like to be able to win or to be in close games with your Death Guard, you know, play this list. Just keep in mind though that this is a list that's built for late game, so your list plays best on turns 3, 4, and 5. So just be patient with how you place your units, keep them safe so that the last 3 turns you can do the damage that we were mentioning over here, where this unit essentially would have been able to take out an entire Warden unit that has 4 invulnerable saves for their 4 invulnerable saves, so that they just never die. And I was able to basically, I would have been able to wipe that unit with the combo. So just keep in mind, like, I know everything is doom and gloom with Death Guard right now. but there are combos inside the codex. There are ways you can play the Death Guard that is extremely effective and can help you to win a lot of games. That's gonna be it for the video, okay? So if you have any questions, you can leave those questions in the comment section below. If you like this video, you can like this video. Keep in mind that when we get to 10,000 subscribers, every 10,000 that we get, I'm going to be giving away a kill team on the channel so that you guys can play kill team with that kill team. You just have to make sure that you're subscribed and that you hit the bell icon so you're notified when I upload a video, okay? Always remember, eat healthy, okay? Work out every single day. And most importantly, you guys gotta remember to believe in yourself, all right? Peace out, people.